Hello, and welcome to another segment of the Coatesville Area Public Library's Oral History Project. I'm Kirk Witmer, and I'm talking here today with Kirk John, someone who has called Coatesville his home ever since he was born on Harmony Street. Good morning, Mr. John.
Good morning, Kirk.
Glad to have you with us today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Good.
In fact, when you get my age, you're glad to be anywhere.
And how old are you?
I'm pushing 80.
All right, we'll let it go at that.
Yeah,
You did tell me that you were born on Harmony Street.
that's correct.
And
Yeah.
I assume that almost 80 years ago, there were a lot of people born in homes.
Practically everybody was born at home then. Very
What-
few in the hospital.
What address again was it?
564 Harmony. My sister was born in Coatesville in a front bedroom on Charles Street, and my brother was born in a front bedroom in Thorndale. We lived in Thorndale for 2 years, and that's the only time I didn't live in Coatesville my entire life. And being around for 80 years, I've seen a lot of Coatesville changes during that time.
I'm sure that you have. Tell us what you can remember of the look of Coatesville when you were a youngster.
Well, my father was a nice man, and he got around. In those days, they had very little bit of transportation, very few automobiles. My grandfather had probably the only car on Olive Street between 5th and 6th Avenue. That's a long avenue with Virginia and Woodland in between, and there were very few automobiles in those days. And my dad had a nice truck, and being with the truck, we could get around town. There was Bethlehem Steel Company down in the southern part of the valley, below Lucan's. Then there was Lucan's, and we used to serve a lot of ice to the mills. In fact, the first 3 loads of ice we took in the morning were to those mills before we started delivering retail around Coatesville. As I say, I was born there on Harmony Street. My grandfather lived on Olive right behind us, and he had a barn behind his house, and which would have been behind ours, but off further to the west. And he kept his ice wagons in there, and the horses for the Brandywine Fire Company. My grandfather was a charter member of the Brandywine Fire Company, and in those days, the horse-drawn fire trucks. And I remember the horses' names were You and I, those 3 names. And whenever the fire whistle would blow, those horses would really tear down the barn trying to get to haul the fire trucks.
Well, of course, that was their chance to get out and run, I'm sure.
That's right, that's right. And my grandfather, he was boss rigger down at Lucan Steel Company for his main job, but he also was a businessman, and he built an ice house between Olive Street and Harmony Street, right back where the Jewish synagogue parking lot has been in recent years. And he used to take the ice off of the pond up at Icedale and put it in freight cars and bring it down to Coatesville and take it off of the ice in wagons and bring it down and put it in the ice house and cover it with sawdust. This was in the wintertime. Cover it with sawdust, and also they'd have ice in the summertime to deliver to the houses. And he did this for several years, and then he built the first ice plant in Coatesville, also at that same place just off of Olive Street, and in the front of the same lot I was talking about where he had this ice house before. And he manufactured artificial ice there. And he had that ice plant going, and then my dad, when he married my mother, who was a Kirk. By the way, that's where I got my name from my mother. She was Hazel Kirk. I don't know where you got your name, because I insured you when you were a baby.
I know you
I remember when I was in the insurance business. But anyway, to get back to the ice, they manufactured the ice there for, I don't know how many years, until Atlantic Ice Company tried to buy them out. Grandfather wouldn't sell to them. So they built an ice plant up the other side of 4th Avenue, west of 4th Avenue, on Harmony Street, and they manufactured ice there and tried to outsell my grandfather. Got the price down so low that grandfather couldn't compete, so finally he sold out to them. So then they closed down their plant, used my grandfather's plant for a number of years. Now this is back before refrigeration, back before people had electric refrigerators in their home. They had ice boxes, all kinds of ice boxes. And when I was 11, 12, 13, 14, I was carrying ice in those days. This is what we used to carry ice in. Of course, I was just a little guy, and I used to carry 25, 50 pounds of these to deliver them to homes. And my dad, he'd carry, when we went to Lucan's, he'd carry 50 pounds in the tongs and 100 pounds on his shoulder and go back into the different places where Lucan's or Bethlehem required ice for the men to come to get their water to drink. We also served ice to places like the Acme, which was between 1st and 2nd Avenue, and the farmer's market down to bottom of Pennsylvania Avenue. And I used to use this chipper to chip baskets full of ice. I guess for the Acme, I used to chip 4 baskets full, and they were big baskets full of ice. And then down at the Ekman Farmers Market, I used to chip maybe 3 or 4 baskets down there. They used it to put on the chickens and the meat and stuff to keep things cold.
Certainly.
Again, before electric refrigeration ever came in. As far as transportation was concerned in those days, as I've already said, the fire trucks were pulled by horses. So were the bond bread trucks. So were the milk wagons. So were the early ice wagons. My dad did have a Ford truck, ice wagon, but as far as our family was concerned, our transportation was in a motorcycle. My dad had a motorcycle with a sidecar on it. And when he took the family out, mother and my sister and I sat in the sidecar, and Dad drove the motorcycle. And the first car he had, I remember, was an Overland. It didn't have any sides on it, but it did have sides that could be fastened on if the weather got inclement and started to rain or anything. Hand windshield washers, you had to wipe them with your hand like that. And I remember one day, after we had moved to Thorndale, which was in 1925, we took a ride over to Lionville. Now, you won't believe this, but on that ride over to Lionville and back to Thorndale, we had 3 flat tires. The roads weren't good then at all. They were muddy and, bad roads. This was in the summertime. And when you had a flat tire, you didn't have a spare. You had to stop. You had to take the wheel off, take the tire off, take the tube out, patch the tube, put it back in the tire, put it back on the wheel, and then go again. We had to do that 3 times. From noon, when we left after lunch, till we got back after dark, we had those 3 flat tires. The next car my dad got was a Chandler, and that was quite an upbeat from the old Overland. And it was a pretty good car. Still no heat, no radio, still a hand windshield washer, wiper. But how things have changed in transportation-wise. I remember when I was in 1st and 2nd grade down at Thorndale, I went to a one-room school where they had outhouses, and at recess, my teacher used to ring a bell like this to call us back into school. And one day somebody said a barn horse dropped dead up the road, up above, on Bondsville Road, up above the Thorndale School. So a bunch of us guys, boys, we ran up there to see this dead horse. Sure enough, he was laying there still in the whatever you call that the horses get in.
The harness. And
he was dead laying there in the middle of the road. Of course, there wasn't any traffic in those days, so it didn't make much difference. And then in 1926, we moved back to Coatesville, and then I lived there at the top of 11th Avenue the rest of my life. I went to 3rd grade at Terry School, which is no longer there.
Yes.
3rd, 4th, and 5th. I went to 6th, 7th, and 8th, and 9th, 10th, and 11th, and 12th up at Gordon, which was our high school then. By the way, my dad graduated from that same high school in 1910. And there was 26 in his class.
Wow.
13 girls, 13 boys. I had a picture of their class on my bedroom wall for all the years I was growing up. I graduated in 1937. There was 287 in our class. Now, that's only 27 years later. And from 26 to 287. So you can see how Coatesville area grew in that time. But I still graduated from the Gordon High School. And we had our baccalaureate service up at the Methodist Church, and we had our graduation service in the old YMCA auditorium, if you remember that.
Yes. I should mention, for those who are listening, that the Gordon High School at that time is now the Carl Benner Elementary School on Main Street in Coatesville between 5th and 6th Avenue.
That's correct. And when I graduated in 1937, Scott was just being started to be built. I was only just 17 when I graduated, and I tried to get a job down in Scott, and you had to be 18 and you had to belong to a union in order to work there. I also tried to get a job on electrification of the railroad, which was electrifying from Philadelphia to Harrisburg. But again, you had to be 18, you had to belong to a union. And that's when they put that electrification system in, believe it or not. And it was only in a few years when the diesel engines came out, and then the diesel engines took over, and I think they lost a lot of money electrifying that section of the railroad.
Kirk, tell us a little bit about some of the social clubs and social activities that were going on at that time.
Well, that wasn't too far after World War I, and the VFW and the American Legion were pretty busy in those days. And I remember both of my uncles were in the American Legion. And by the way, that was up where the Coatesville Area Senior Center is today. That was the original American Legion building.
On Fifth Avenue.
Yeah, on North Fifth Avenue. And they used to have a fair once a year to support their what they did. And I remember they used to chance off a car every year. And one year I was up there, I was about 12, 13, 14 years old, and they asked me to pull the winning ticket for the car. And the guy that won it was so happy he gave me $25 for pulling his name.
And that was big money.
Man, I was
then.
the richest boy in Coatesville.
Oh,
I'll tell
sure.
you, I was scared to go home. I went up the middle of the street whistling and looking around all the way home with $25 in my pocket. That's the most I ever saw in my life. And they used to have, they called it Armistice Day in those days. Today it's called Veterans Day. But they used to have big parades in Coatesville, and both of my uncles played bugles in the Drum and Bugle Corps. And that was a big day for me when I'd see the uncles going by blowing their bugles in that Drum and Bugle Corps. And I thought a lot of that. And it was also at a time when the World War I veterans were starting to die off, when I was in junior high school and high school. And being that I was a bugler in scouting and played in the band, they used to get me out of high school to bugle at the funeral services for the veterans that were dying off. And I know there was at least 10, 12 graveside services where I played taps for World War I veterans. And that was meaningful to me, too.
I'm sure it
in
was.
those days.
Well, you got a little older, and eventually you went to work at Lucan's.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, I couldn't get a job when I first graduated from high school for, maybe 6 months. And then Lucan hired me. And I went to work down at Lucan, and we were welding on these big trucks that you see that hauls a lot of dirt, that has a lot of welding on it. We were welding those beds for those trucks, first off. Then we started welding mooring bits that went on ships that were hauling to wrap the ropes around, these big round things like that. Then we started welding, and then by that time I was a class welder, Navy qualified, and I started welding on engines for submarines. And it was at this time when World War I broke out. I remember I was welding on Sunday morning when the word came out that the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor. And I was welding at the time as a Navy classified welder on engines for submarines. So it wasn't long after that that I enlisted in the service, and thus ended my work at Lucan Weld. But when I come back after the war, I went back to work there for another couple of years, after I went to college for a little while and didn't care for that. And then I went back to Lucan Weld before I went with Prudential Insurance Company, where I spent 31 years. That took most of my working life.
Yes. Your service career, I know you've done a lot of flying.
Yes.
Which branch? Air Force?
Yes.
And where were you stationed?
All
All over.
around. But my combat was all in England, in the 8th Air Force, 55th Fighter Group, 338th Squadron. And I flew 47 missions and 334 combat hours. I was shot down on my 10th mission, crash landed in a field in Belgium, and had quite a career there, but I don't think you want me to talk much about that. You want to know more about the history of Coatesville.
Well, of course we do.
Yeah. I remember when I graduated from high school, I was also a lifeguard. I had YMCA Senior Life Saving and ARC Life Saving, and I used to life save up at Pratt's Dam, which people don't even know existed today, and Kirk's Dam used to be there, which was above Rock Run and below where 340 goes across. And my two uncles that I spoke about before, they had a boathouse there. And we used to go up there in canoe on Saturday afternoons or Sunday afternoons on Kirk's Dam. Later on, probably in the late 30s or early 40s, they moved almost all of those boathouses down onto West Charles Street. And if you go out West Charles Street today, you'll see a lot of little houses which were originally boathouses up there at Kirk's Dam.
Mm-hmm. So they were transported down.
They were transported down there.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Tell us about your insurance sales. I know you did that for 30-some years.
31 years, yes.
And as you mentioned earlier, I was one of those that you insured when I was just a youngster. I do remember you.
Just a baby.
I remember you coming to our house to collect premiums.
Yeah.
Which is not something that insurance salesmen do now. It certainly must have been a different sort of atmosphere at that time.
It was. When I went to work for Prudential, our main theme was to give service. That's how they built the business, by giving service. When there was a death claim, we were right there and took care of the claim, took care of everything we could take care of. It changed over the years, and after I was there for about 20, 25 years, I didn't like the job. I liked it before when it was a service job. I went into 600 homes a month to collect insurance and to write insurance. And then they started dividing up my debit and giving it to new debits until they got me down to where I only had about 200 homes in a much smaller area than what I had originally. And it was harder to write insurance, but then they didn't give service any thought then. It was mainly write business, go out and write business, you know. Even if you have to cash in old policies to get the premium to write new business, do it. And I didn't like that.
No.
I wanted to treat people the way I would want to be treated myself. So I couldn't wait to get out. As soon as I hit age 60, I left.
That was enough for you.
Yeah, and I've been retired now for 18 years, which is a long time to be retired, but I'm thankful. I've had good health. The Lord's been good to me, and I've enjoyed it. My wife's been retired 16 years. She's 2 years younger than I, and we've had a great life. Play a lot of tennis. We've been in the senior games. Maybe a lot of the people that'll see this or hear it won't realize that they have senior games for senior people over 50 years old. They have it on the county level, run by the county. They have it on the state level, run by the state, and they have it on the national level. And my wife and I have been to all the nationals, which have been 8 of them so far, and they have them every other year. And you have to qualify at the state level. You have to get a silver or gold medal at the state level to be qualified to go to the nationals. And it's quite interesting.
I'm sure.
My wife's been the state champion for 5-6 years in tennis, for ladies tennis.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I know you're also very active in your church, which is the First Baptist Church in Coatesville.
Right, right.
What sorts of projects has your church taken on that you've participated in?
Well, Kirk, as you knew before, because I was born there on Harmony Street within the shadows of the church, I was taken there, believe it or not, when I was 2 weeks old. And I've gone there ever since. That's almost 80 years. I became a member there when I was 12 years old, and I've been on all the boards and all through the years. I never joined any service clubs because I felt I could do the Lord more good by working through my church. And we have done a lot of good through the church. We've served meals down at the Atkinson Center, and I've served Meals on Wheels for 25, 30 years. And it's just hard to recall all that we have done through the church, but it's been my major part of my retired life. It really has.
You know, you're still keeping active
Yeah.
at 80 years of age.
And for a number of years, at least 25, I volunteered up at the VA hospital and went around with the chaplain up there to different wards. For the early years, I used to play my trumpet to entertain the men. And then later on, when I stopped playing trumpet, I'd take my harmonica and I'd play that and used to sing. It was good. It made me realize how fortunate I was to have good health. When I'd leave the VA, I was so thankful that I was able to be out and not be confined to a place like. And yet, if I ever get to the place where I have a disease or something that's going, that's where I want to go. I want to go to the VA because they take good care of the vets up there.
I know they do.
Yes, they do.
Well, Kirk, it's been a pleasure having you with us today. I've certainly enjoyed the sharing that you've brought with us to our videotaping today. And I can't thank you enough for being part of our oral history project on behalf of the Coatesville Public Library.
Well, I thank you too, Kirk, and hope I haven't talked too much. I think of a number of things more I should have said that I didn't, but thank you a lot.
Thank you.
Mhm.